Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 7, Episode 3, The Maestro. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm doing pretty well. I am not going to talk about my sore body again, but I am going to talk about my sore heart. In a really cool voice, apparently. No, I am missing my daughter who left for Costa Rica last week, who I'm sure is having an amazing time today. In fact, according to her itinerary, she will be whale watching and learning from marine biologists. I don't know if George Costanza is involved, but probably real marine biologists. But just learning about their observation of whales and how they photo ID'd them. And oh my gosh, it just sounds amazing. And then a rainforest hike. This girl is living it up. And I have to just remember all of the great experiences she's having to kind of drown out all of my emotions about missing her, but I really am missing her. It's really hard. My son, though, I think is enjoying being the only child. He doesn't have to, do the whole compromising with the sister stuff that has to be done, especially one of the biggest moments of compromise for usually him will be right before bed. We let the kids watch maybe a couple episodes of a show, and usually he's very accommodating, my little boy. He's very sweet. He'll just be like, well, whatever she wants to watch is fine, even though I know it's not something he would usually want to watch. But they do agree on a few shows. But he's usually the one that's like, it's fine, because she's pretty stubborn. She doesn't want to let go of her choice. But anyway, I think he's really enjoying being the only child for the week, even though he claims he misses his sister. But he's also like, oh, can we watch this? Oh, can we eat here? Oh, can we do this? Because she may not enjoy some of those activities. Also, I wanted to acknowledge that last week was my mother's birthday. Last Friday, I released the episode, The Postponement. And I guess I postponed my birthday wish. So I probably should have done it last week, but I just wanted to take a little moment and say happy birthday to my mother. Real glad you were born, Mommy. And it's always such a dumb thing to say. But anyway, I always miss my mom. One of the hardest things moving to Colorado from Michigan was leaving my mother and, not being close to her. So it's tough, and it's always, just kind of long distance wishes and all that good stuff. But I know she had a great birthday dinner with my sister-in-law and my nephew. My brother wasn't even there. Okay. He went out of town. So I guess I'm not the only bad kid, but no, my mom had a great birthday, and I love you, and happy birthday, Mommy. All right, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for The Maestro is as follows. Elaine dates an orchestra conductor who insists everyone address him as Maestro. Trouble ensues after George demands that the security guard at a store owned by Susan's uncle should be allowed to sit. A balm given to Kramer by the Maestro heals his coffee burns, forcing Kramer to settle his lawsuit by taking Java World's offer of free coffee for life. To spite the Maestro, Jerry rents a house in Tuscany from Poppy's cousin. This episode was written by Larry David. All right, we start out in Monks. George is telling Elaine how sort of surprised and hurt he was by what the rabbi said on his show. So at the end of the last episode, we see George and Susan in bed, and they watch Rabbi Kirschbaum's cable access show, and he recognizes, oh, that's the rabbi from Elaine's building. And, well, here's all of the really awful things that Elaine said about him and his engagement. Elaine apologizes. She's like, it wasn't you, George. It was just the whole marriage thing. Yeah, well, what about all the loser stuff? I don't know where he got that. I never said that. I said, I've never seen you looser. Meanwhile, Jerry can't understand why anyone would eat canned fruit. I mean, if you're in the army, that's understandable, but fresh fruit, it's just 2 aisles over. I love this reaction. George just says, scintillating as always. Well, he has to go. He's going shopping. Elaine wonders, what kind of shopping? Clothes shopping. Where? Ross's. That's a nice store, she says. Yeah, it's her uncle's. Jerry wonders if there's a discount. One would hope, George says, and exits, but not after taking some of the money he laid down. I've watched it a couple times. I feel like he takes all of the money he lays down on the table, which means did he just not pay? I mean, after what Elaine did, she should probably cover his lunch. All right, my take on this scene. Once again, just like in the postponement, we're seeing this continuation from the last episode, which I'm not going to get into it again, but it's kind of uncommon for an episodic show like Seinfeld is. It's not a series where you need to see, all the episodes prior to understand what's going on. But I like it. I think it's kind of cool that they had this continuation. And like I mentioned last week, Larry David made a point to be the writer for the first 3 episodes of this season because he really wanted to set the tone with George and this whole engagement storyline, which also makes sense how George is really central to basically the first 3 episodes. I mean, this one, we get a little bit of a break from a lot of the engagement stuff. But I like that was the strategy behind Larry David's writing here is that, okay, I'm just going to make every episode kind of bleed into the next. I honestly think it's a little bit of a heartbreaking exchange between George and Elaine. I mean, George, it's a great performance by Jason Alexander. He looks so hurt by Elaine's admissions. And, that big mouth rabbi just had to blurt it all out. And Greg last week mentioned how in that scene where Elaine's being super fake and congratulating George, giving him hugs and kisses and just saying how much he's grown. I mean, she's being totally fake, but I mean, he doesn't know that. Greg mentions how George looks so excited by it. I mean, he's genuinely touched by what Elaine's saying. So you can see in Jason Alexander's performance how incredibly heartbroken George is by, learning the truth and knowing how she really feels. And she's kind of on her heels here, right? I mean, I love that she apologizes genuinely. I think that is a genuine apology that Elaine's like, I'm really sorry, George. And I also love how she lies through her teeth about the looser thing. Oh, it's so great. And I love that little glint in her eye. Such a great performance by JLD. Like you see after she says looser, she's totally pleased with herself. She's totally amused that she thought so quick on her feet. It's a split second, but watch her face after she says looser. It's a delight. And Jerry's total uninvolvement and disinterest in George and Elaine's exchange, that couldn't get more Seinfeldian. He's got this canned versus fresh fruit train of thought, and he just needs to interject with it. It's so funny. It makes no sense to have that in this scene, but that's part of what makes Seinfeld work so well is that we get these kind of real life interjections that, yeah, it has nothing to do with the plot. We don't hear about it again, but that just happens to be what Jerry's thinking about at the time. And when he's talking about it, it's so funny how Elaine just puts her head down on the table. She's like, oh my God, I'm dealing with this guy in front of me who I have to apologize to. He caught me saying such bad things about him. I've got this guy talking about canned fruit. Like, what the hell? Where am I? Why am I doing this? I got to make some changes. And then I just wanted to mention, here we go again with my touchy-feely comments about a show that's nowhere near touchy-feely. But so after George and Elaine have their little confrontation, there's such a casualness to their conversation about the shopping. It's kind of an indication about how they've gotten past this little hiccup in the relationship. And that's just how close friends and family act. You can be screaming at someone at 1 minute and then like 5 minutes later, you guys are just talking about what you're having for dinner. So I just like that. Again, shows the intimacy of their friendship. Maybe I should do like a touchy-feely segment nowadays. I mean, I feel like I'm bringing this up a lot. Maybe it's just because I'm missing my daughter. But yeah, if you guys have any ideas for a touchy-feely theme song, let me know. All right, next we are in Jackie Child's office. Kramer is explaining what happened at the movies with his coffee cup from Java World. And Jackie is intently listening and clarifying where he needs. What is that, Italian coffee? Half milk, half coffee? Mm-hmm. Jackie asks about his sipping technique and how hot it was. He gets fired up about the movie theater's rule about outside drinks. He thinks it's outrageous, egregious, preposterous. Kramer explains how the coffee spilled when he was going to his seat. And Jackie asks about the top and how they put the top on. And they made the top. You didn't make the top, did you? Then he pages his secretary, Susie, to get him a cafe latte from Java World with the top. We're going to run some tests on that top. Then he wonders if Kramer's been to the doctor. Back to Susie, he says to set up an appointment for Mr. Kramer with Dr. Bison. Tell him it's for me. Kramer asks, what do you think, Jackie? Do you think we have a chance? And Jackie is very confident. He says, get me one coffee drinker on that jury, and you're going to walk out of there a rich man. Next, we are at Ross's clothing store. Susan is trying to get George on board with the flashy red shirt, which he doesn't like. He says it's too flashy. Well, you could use some flash. Don't change me, Susan. He claims there's a lot of women who'd like to trade places with her. And she just looks at him and says, name one. Her uncle walks up and asks how it's going, and Susan's so frustrated. Oh, he's impossible to shop for, Uncle Ned. Then he mentions to her that he's going to Costa Rica. Oh, what a coincidence. And that he'll see her when he returns. George looks over and notices the security guard standing by the door. He just doesn't understand that. He tells Susan, why do they have to stand all day? Why can't they sit? Because he's a security guard. Well, that's brutal to be on his feet all day. I'm going to say something to your uncle. Susan grabs his arm. You just met him. Don't say anything. Aren't you concerned? Not really, she says. Then we hear another George voiceover. Not concerned. What kind of person is this? And I'm marrying her? And she returns with a flashy red shirt. All right, George, what do you think? All right, next we are at Jerry's apartment. Jerry asks Elaine what she did last night. Nothing. Well, I know nothing, but what did you actually do? Literally nothing. I sat in a chair and I stared. Like putty? Wow, that really is nothing. Told you, she says. Kramer enters, and Jerry asks, hey, why are you so dressed up? He just came from a meeting with his lawyer, he says, and says that if he gets one coffee drinker on that jury, I'm going to be a rich man. Elaine thinks that's despicable. How does he know? I'm a coffee drinker. I wouldn't give you a nickel, Kramer. Well, Kramer's like, you wouldn't be on that jury. He would have weeded you out. And Jerry's surprised Kramer is so litigious. Oh, I can be quite litigious. Elaine still can't believe this. Who has ever heard of someone suing a company because their coffee is too hot? Coffee is supposed to be hot. Kramer brings up how Jackie thinks the top was faulty. Jackie thinks the top was faulty. Oh, Elaine's so upset she needs to go to the crapper. Kramer hears some knocking across the hall at his door. He looks to see, and it's his friend. So he comes over to Jerry's place, and Jerry greets him. Hi, Bob. Kramer motions. Oh, I'm sorry, Maestro, with a bow. The Maestro apparently wanted to drop off some Chinese balm for Kramer's burns. It's all herbal. Kramer is so touched. He also says how he hasn't seen him around lately. Oh, yes, I've been at my house in Tuscany. Oh, Tuscany. You hear that, Jerry? Jerry says, oh, I hear it's beautiful there. Well, if you're thinking about getting a place, don't bother. There's nothing available. Jerry's like, what? Elaine enters from the crapper, and the Maestro is so delighted. Oh, who might you be? I might be Elaine. Jerry introduces him as Bob Cobb. Kramer corrects him quickly. Maestro. Oh, Elaine is intrigued. Maestro. It is my very great pleasure, he says as he kisses her hand. Oh, Elaine loves that. Enchanté. They both say that they have to get going at the same time. Jinx, buy me a Coke. Oh, I love it when that happens. I know, it's so coincidental. And they exit together. After they've left, Kramer glares at Jerry. You know you hurt the Maestro's feelings. Oh, why? Because I didn't call him Maestro? Yeah, I feel silly calling him Maestro because it's so stupid. Kramer points out, well, he is a conductor. Oh, he conducts the Policemen's Benevolent Association Orchestra. Well, he's still a conductor, he says. Well, he worked pretty fast with Elaine. And then Kramer talks up his flight of the bumblebees and spits heavily when he says it. My take on this scene, I think it's a great scene. I love how Elaine literally did nothing. I can't imagine doing that unless I was terribly depressed or something, just sitting in a chair and staring. But again, it made me think of Putty, just that we see him do it later on a flight, sitting and staring. And to sort of connect the storylines, isn't that sort of what George wants the security guard to do, essentially? I mean, he wants him sitting in a chair and maybe not staring straight ahead, but like definitely looking around. So I just thought that was interesting. Once again, Elaine is sort of the voice of reason or the counter view against the guys, which we see quite often. But in this case, I do have to disagree with her. So the old lady who actually did sue McDonald's, now that's why this is a plot in this episode, because it's based on a real story. There was this elderly woman who ordered coffee from McDonald's and ended up getting third-degree burns all over her thighs and even in her private area. And it's actually a really tragic case. I saw a documentary about, I believe it was tort law. If I'm getting that wrong, I apologize, but I don't have the energy to research it. But anyway, I remember seeing it in the documentary, and a lot of what was portrayed in the media was super unfair. It just made her look litigious. It made her look, like she was bringing this frivolous lawsuit. It was even so far as to accuse her of just being a clumsy idiot, or, hey, maybe you shouldn't drink it in your car, dummy, kind of thing. It was just, there was a lot of vitriol against this little old lady who in fact almost died. She was put into a medically induced coma, I believe, because of the amount of pain and burns. They actually showed pretty grisly photos of the burns. And again, like I said, it was all over her lap, private area, in her thighs. I mean, it was horrifying. And for an elderly person, their skin is pretty delicate. And so at the point of this documentary, her son was being interviewed. And in fact, something I think that was very misconstrued in the media. I'm sorry, I know this podcast is not about this case, but I just wanted to talk about it because, I don't know, I just want to talk about it because I think it's just so unfair, especially nowadays in this climate we're in now, how things can be so unfairly portrayed just for the sake of ratings, for the sake of, having some kind of salacious, scandalous thing. And it's it doesn't even matter if it's based in fact. But anyway, I learned a lot when I saw this. Anyway, her son was talking about how she wasn't in the driver's seat. In fact, he was driving, he ordered the coffee for her, passed it to her. They parked the car, and she was going to put some creamer and sugar in it or whatever. So she was just going to prepare her coffee, but they had pulled over, parked the car so she could do that more easily. But it was when she opened the top and it spilled on her, that's when she got burned. I think people thought, oh, you're driving with it, of course it's going to spill. Anyway, something else that came out of the case, because she did actually end up getting a settlement, was that it was revealed that many of these McDonald's restaurants never regulated the temperature, even though they were given a specific range of temperature for the coffee urn to be at. They wouldn't, and they were supposed to check it regularly throughout the day so that it wouldn't get too hot, wouldn't get too cold. But this case revealed that almost, I don't know, I can't remember the number now, but an alarming amount of those restaurants, when they kind of do these surprise tests, hey, what's your coffee temperature? It would be easily 30 to 40% hotter than it was supposed to be. So it was really an issue. And another thing that just broke my heart about that case was, again, it was so twisted in the media. And she became very depressed, and she didn't want to leave her house. And she thought she was a pariah, and she was made this awful, horrible thing she went through, which again, she almost died. This woman almost died from the burns. The last few years of her life were just really sad. And her son talks about that. She was in a massive depression. And it just, I don't know, it's just my little soapbox moment of, you just can't always glom onto these narratives that the media wants to create because it's entertainment. This is a very sad case and real woman. So she's probably saved a lot of your asses from burning your tongues too much, or burning your thighs, or burning whatever, because now McDonald's doesn't fuck around when it comes to their coffee and their temperature. They make sure it's within that acceptable limit. And it's because of that woman who the media just dragged through the mud. All right, I'm going to step down from my soapbox and move on with this episode. That was quite the tangent, but I needed to get it off my chest. Okay, so back to the scene. I love the way Elaine flirts with the Maestro. She's adorable with him, and I love their immediate chemistry. And it's not surprising that how taken he is with her right away. I mean, she's adorable with that hair and the glasses. Absolutely so, so cute. And I do like the Maestro character. He's so quirky. And I actually love that for Elaine as a boyfriend. I mean, at least he has some substance, and JLD has a funny character to play off of versus some of the other duds we've seen her with. All right, next we are at Monk's. George is wearing the red shirt. He asks if Jerry likes it. No, not particularly. Too flashy? It's burning my retina, Jerry says. Susan picked that out for you, huh? Begrudgingly, George denies it. No. And I mean, I just have to point out, like Jerry hasn't worn worse. Do you remember the boyfriend episode? The paisley shirt, Jerry? Yeah, shut your mouth. George asks Jerry's thoughts about security guards, standing in stores. Does that bother you? Jerry says no. Yeah. See, that's why I'm different, George says. You can always sense the slightest human suffering. Are you sensing anything right now? George says, it's inhuman to make a man stand in one spot for 8 hours. And Jerry says, well, what about being alert in criminal activity? What, you can't jump up from a chair? Boom, I'm up. Stop it, stop it, stop it. For those of you who are probably not interested, that is a regular thing said in my house. Stop it, stop it, stop it. I do the fingers. It's super fun. I highly recommend it. Jerry's like, well, what if he turned down a chair? Oh, get out of here. Who's going to turn down a chair? I think I'm going to talk to him. And Jerry's like, I know you will. Kramer enters and tells Jerry that Java World wants to settle. He's going to be rich. Why are they settling? Because they don't want the bad publicity. All because you spilled coffee on yourself? And of course, George orders a coffee, boiling hot. All right, next we are at a restaurant where Elaine and the Maestro are having their date. He's telling her about falling in love with Tuscany and the house he has there. The waiter comes up to take their order, and Elaine's a little taken off guard. Oh God, Bob, what are you getting? Maestro kind of looks at her and tells the waiter, we'll need a few minutes. He buries his head in his hand. He tells Elaine, I'm sorry. I didn't mention it earlier, but I prefer to be called Maestro. She looks at him and says, excuse me? Well, I am a conductor. Yeah, so? Then he gets a little perturbed. Oh, I suppose it's okay for Leonard Bernstein to be called Maestro since he conducted the New York Philharmonic. So he gets to be called Maestro, and I don't. Well, Elaine thinks he was only called that when he was conducting. I mean, not in social situations. His friends just probably called him Lenny. Nope. Bob Cobb saw Leonard Bernstein at a bar, and someone said, hello, Maestro, how about a beer? Okay? So that's a fact. Elaine kind of takes this in and says, Maestro, huh? Okay. And he's appeased. And they cheers, and Elaine says it again. Maestro, and shrugs. My take on this scene, okay, it's one of my favorite scenes of the entire series. And you might be thinking, this scene? But I think it's also because my husband loves the Maestro so much, and especially in this scene. And I have to call out Mark Metcalf as the Maestro. He is so funny. The choices this man makes as the Maestro, holy shit, it's so great. His little tantrum about being called Maestro. Well, first, the thing my husband loves is after he tells the waiter they'll need a few minutes, and that immediate putting his head in his hand, it makes my husband like hunch over laugh every time. He just thinks it's so funny. The level of distress this has brought him when Elaine's like, oh, what are you getting, Bob? Like, he can't even take it. He's got to put his head down. It's amazing. Anyway, Mark Metcalf, just such odd and brilliant choices as a Maestro. I never get tired of watching him. Like I said, from that moment he puts his head in his hand, and then okay, so that's a fact. It's almost like he's going to cry. Such a weird and funny character made even more entertaining by this actor. And here we have yet another scene where JLD is sort of the straight performer against this kind of bigger character. But I love JLD's performance. She's so nonchalant. It's very grounded portrayal here of Elaine. And it elevates the humor, and it illustrates how ridiculous the Maestro is. I mean, the look on her face before she says, excuse me? Like, it's just kind of like a blank stare. Like, did I hear you right? I mean, it's a split second, but she's genuinely like baffled and then curious. By the end of his rant about Leonard Bernstein, or actually, I think it's pronounced Leonard Bernstein, she's sort of agape, but I love that we see that moment of her make the decision of like, you know what? I will accept this and let's move on. Maybe she had her mind on a trip to Tuscany, but as we've discussed before, Elaine's a bit desperate. I mean, she goes out with the Jimmy, for God's sakes, and Putty. She's willing to accept some quirks if it means finding a man. So I think to her, calling him the Maestro is kind of small potatoes. And I do love that little shrug she gives after they clink glasses. She's just kind of like, all right, whatever. Makes me chuckle every time. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry is shuffling to the kitchen. He's just woken up. We hear Kramer in a panic getting into his apartment, tells Jerry that the balm healed his burn and that he's finished with the lawsuit. Well, I thought they wanted to settle. What if they want to see the burn? Then you're in a lot of trouble. All right, next we're back in Ross's clothing store. George saunters in, makes eye contact with the security guard who looks at him pretty sternly. George asks if he's tired. No. How come no chair? What? Okay, this is another thing my husband, like this episode is one of my husband's favorites. When that guy says, "What?" Oh, my husband laughs so hard. George says, "I couldn't help but notice you don't have a chair." "I don't need a chair." "Oh, no. George wasn't suggesting that. You're obviously a very proportioned individual, but have they ever offered you a chair?" "No." "Would you like a chair?" "Well, I suppose if they gave me one, I'd sit down." "You would, wouldn't you?" "Well, obviously, I'd rather sit than stand if that's what you're asking." "That's exactly my point." "Well, who wouldn't?" I love how this guy is immediately annoyed by George, which I get it. So George says, "Frankly, I'd like to walk in here one day and see you sitting down. That would give me a lot of pleasure." And he exits. Next, we're in a cab. Jackie is livid with Kramer for putting the bomb on. "Who told you to put the bomb on?" "And that he hasn't even been to see the doctor." "I guess I screwed up, huh, Jackie?" "Damn right you screwed up. Who the hell gave it to you anyway?" Kramer says, "The Maestro." "The who?" Oh, so a Maestro tells you to put the bomb on and you do it?" "Well, my stomach was burning," Kramer says. Ugh, Jackie says this is a public humiliation. Kramer says, "Well, I didn't know the bomb was going to work." "Do you know what a bomb is?" I'm sorry, I keep quoting it, but it's so funny. I could watch Jackie Chiles all day. Apparently, Jackie is a bomb expert because he says there's no telling what a bomb will do. They're unpredictable. Kramer apologizes again, and they pull over to the building. Next, we're on the street. Jerry asks Elaine about her date with the Maestro, and she says, yeah, they had a good time. "Did you know that Mozart died while writing the Requiem?" "Yeah, everybody knows that. It was an Amadeus." Jerry asks about the Maestro thing. "Yeah, I called him Maestro. It didn't bother you?" She says it did at first, but I got used to it. "All right," Jerry says, "call me Jerry the Great." "I am not calling you that." "You called him Maestro." "He is a Maestro." "Well, I'm great." "So you say." Elaine is invited to the house in Tuscany, she brags. And Jerry brings up the whole thing. It's like, out of the blue, he tells me there's no places to rent. Maybe he's embarrassed of Americans. "Yeah," Elaine says, "or maybe there are no places to rent." "In all of Tuscany? I'd wonder," he says. My take on this scene, it's a pretty fun exchange. That Amadeus line always cracks me up. I think it's the delivery. "Yeah, everyone knows that. It was an Amadeus." Oddly enough, I remember seeing that movie in the theater. We went to the Main Art Theater in Royal Oak, Michigan, which has now been torn down. A lot of you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but it was like a historic theater in my town. And it kind of broke my heart when I found out they were tearing it down for, I think, apartments or something. But anyway, I was only 6 years old, and my mom took me and my brother to this movie. And I remember not understanding a damn thing going on. But I have these weird moments. I have some visuals of some of the scenes still in my brain. I know that at some point, the guy who plays Mozart, he does like a big fart at the piano. Like he lifts up the little tails of those old kind of, I don't know what you'd call them, jackets they used to wear. And he flips up and he farts. So I remember that. And then this is super weird, but I remember being a bit shocked and kind of scandalized by the corsets the women were wearing because they pushed their boobs up so big, like so much, and they like squished them up. And I just remember thinking, like, should I be saying this? Those boobs are basically out. So anyway, it's an Oscar-winning film. I believe it won like 5 million Oscars in 1984 or 85 or something. But my memory of it was farts and boobs. I really don't like the whole Jerry the Great thing. I think it's kind of stupid, but it's a cute moment between them. And I just love how annoyed Jerry is by like everything about the Maestro. It's really funny. All right, next we are at the Java World headquarters. We see the executives discussing what they're going to do about the lawsuit before they arrive. And the female executive says, we have to take care of this as soon as possible. We don't want this to get in the press. It'll kill us. And so they decide on free coffee at any of their stores and $50,000. Secretary buzzes to announce that Jackie Childs and Mr. Kramer are there. All right, and they enter, of course, clumsily. So the main guy kind of makes it short and sweet and says, we're prepared to offer free coffee in all of their stores in North America and Europe. Plus, I'll take it. Kramer jumps up and shakes his hand. The actress in this scene is Kimberly Newberry. She plays the female executive. She studied acting at Wayne State University in Detroit. Call out to Detroit. She's an accomplished theater actress as well as an artist. She's also appeared in NYPD Blue, Traffic, and The American President. And I like her performance, the way she grabs her glasses off her face during her dialogues. Nice choice. Example of some physicality and enhancing the delivery of her lines. So I like that. I've always noticed it. All right, next we're in a cab. Jackie is so mad. You'll take it? Who told you to take it? I didn't tell you to take it. I know the Maestro didn't tell you to take it. He wasn't there. Well, Kramer thought they were lucky to get anything. And Jackie Childs was like, free coffee? I don't want free coffee. I wanted to know what was after that plus. Well, I didn't hear any plus, Kramer says. Jackie Childs has never been this humiliated in the 20 years of practicing law. Oh, Kramer spots a Java World and asks the driver to pull over. He's going to get himself a free cafe latte. All right, next we're on the street. Jerry and Elaine are still walking along as they hear the Maestro pull up, blasting a concerto from his convertible car. Elaine is so happy to see him. He sort of conducts until the end of the song, and Elaine joins along in miming the conducting. It's Beethoven's Seventh, apparently. Jerry brings up the whole Tuscany thing. There's no places to rent, huh? You didn't find a place, did you? No, I'm not really looking. Nor should you, he says. Elaine gets so irritated by this back and forth, and Jerry just won't drop it. She's like, it's booked, Jerry. How'd you get yours? Maestro says he just got lucky. Then he asks Elaine to join him. He's about to pop in some Verdi. She starts singing some, I think Verdi. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the Italian words. She gets in the car and they drive away, leaving Jerry on the street. Yeah, maybe I'll check out France, Jerry yells after them. George arrives and Jerry's like, can you believe this guy? Who? Bob Cobb. Bob Cobb? The Maestro. Aw, Mr. Maestro? Jerry tells him about all the Tuscany stuff, and George is like, you want to rent a place in Tuscany? No. So what do you care? I take on this scene. I love Elaine's cute singing moment. I think that little chuckle is real when she's singing, but I'm glad she pulled through and made it to the end of the scene. I have to do some fashion commentary here. Jerry's jeans have always bothered me whenever I've watched this episode. In this scene particularly, like, they're extra nut huggery. Like, it's an official term. I don't know if you guys know this fashion term, nut huggers, but they're just very unflattering. Sorry, Jerry. And finally, at the end of the scene, I like when George has these moments where he gets to point out how idiotic or irrational Jerry's being. Like, I love that little, so what do you care? And, like, walks away, just leaving Jerry going, yeah, why do I care? It's a rare moment of George being the more logical one. All right, next we're in Monks. Jerry is still on this Tuscany thing. And George says, yeah, of course he's trying to keep you out. You know how huge Tuscany is? It's like North Dakota. You know how big North Dakota is, stupid? I don't know why I bother with you. Hey, no one's got a gun to your head. George says he spoke to the security guard and he thinks if he brought him a chair, he'd sit in it. So what kind? A bar stool with a back? Probably with a swivel. Maybe a director's chair. I think that's kind of a pompous look, Jerry says. What about those old kitchen vinyl chairs? Oh, yeah, maybe. And Jerry kind of goes back to the whole Tuscany thing. How can he find out? Wait a second. Poppy's from Tuscany. I'm going to go call him. George says, all right, I'll meet you outside. Then we have a quick scene of Elaine and the Maestro having a blast singing Verdi in his car. Folliculi, follicula, folliculi, follicula. And my take on that little quick scene is it's adorable. All right, next we're on the street. Jerry and George are walking down the street. Jerry has to meet Poppy's cousin in Little Italy. And George is like, you know what about a rocking chair? As they're walking, they run into a racing Kramer at Java World who's yelling at the employees about them giving him dirty looks. He's entitled to these free cafe lattes. So he turns and sees Jerry and George, and they're like, what the hell happened? He tells them, oh, they're giving me dirty looks about the cafe lattes, but that was a settlement. That's it? Jerry points out that he's racing. He needs to settle down. He's all hopped up on the caffeine. Anyway, Kramer's got to go, and he speed walks down the street. All right, next we are on the Maestro's couch. Elaine and the Maestro are making out. She's calling out in pleasure, oh, Bob, oh, Bob. And he pulls away and looks at her. She corrects herself, Maestro, Maestro. My take, so funny, and I love the correction moment, and also awkward. All right, next we're back at Ross's clothing store. George brings in the rocking chair, and this employee comes up to him and says, excuse me, what are you doing? And George reads the riot act to Evan Fane. He says he's probably going to be taking over this whole place, so I'd stay on my good side. Evan is so sorry. Innocent mistake. So he says, here you go, to the security guard. Security guard confirms, Mr. Ross is okay with this? Hey, I'm his nephew. Don't worry about it. So the security guard sits down and says, not bad. Not bad at all. The huge smile on his face, and George is so pleased with himself. All right, next we are at Mr. Ciccio's place. Jerry asks about the house in Tuscany. The guy misunderstands and thinks he wants to rent it, but he doesn't want to rent it. But the guy's a little scary, so he's like, yeah, there's one to rent, this one. Kabish. So Jerry agrees. Ba 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 ba. Bum ba dum bum 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 bum. We have a Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. The actor who plays Mr. Ciccio was in an episode of Gilmore Girls. He plays the man making out with Trix, Richard Gilmore's mother, and Emily sees it and rats her out. He's the one that was wearing the jogging suit. So anyway, you don't really even see his face, so there's no way. I'm not mad at myself for not knowing this connection because this kissing man in the Gilmore Girls episode, you never see his face. But anyway, he made out with the original Lorelai Gilmore. All right, next we're back at Ross's clothing store. The store is being robbed at gunpoint. And the reason it's being robbed at gunpoint is because the security guard is fast asleep in the rocking chair that George gave him. There's also a tag to this episode where Elaine and the Maestro are in Tuscany having a romantic time in paradise. They hear some commotion outside, and sure enough, Jerry and Kramer are getting kicked out of a taxi. They have arrived in Tuscany and are renting the place, I guess, right across the street. And Elaine and the Maestro are not happy. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Sitting, one of life's most delightful pleasures. Chairs, one of the world's most profound inventions. Chairs can serve many purposes. A welcome refuge from a standing profession. A reclining support for enjoying on-screen entertainment. A heightened perch to enjoy a perfectly appointed charcuterie board. But for all the chairs in the world, there is only one meant for literally nothing. Introducing the stair chair. Made by the finest chair artisans in central Calgary, the stair chair is ergonomically ideal for staring. Every detail has been extensively tested and evaluated by the world's leading experts in staring and sitting. The stair chair is as beautiful as it is excellent for staring. Made from the finest mahogany and linen in the world, each leg is positioned 14 inches apart at an 87-degree angle, providing the perfect tension pressure for the lattice butt base. The recline of the back is set at 93 degrees, which will allow for maximum staring time and zero chance of falling asleep. I mean, this isn't a Barca lounger. And finally, what makes the stair chair so remarkable is the patented armrests. Using all-natural silicone rubber, the state-of-the-art platforms cradle the radius and ulna flawlessly, truly putting the rest in armrest. Chairs are magnificent. The stair chair is a revelation. Order your stair chair today at www.pompouschairs.sit. For a limited time, you will receive 2 free tickets to a magical performance by the Policemen's Benevolent Association Orchestra. The stair chair. Literally nothing has never been so comfortable. And we're back. There were a couple extras I wanted to mention. In the inside look, this isn't Elaine related, but I thought it was very interesting how the actor who portrays Jackie Childs, his name's Phil Morris. And so for those of you who may not be aware, I'm sure most of you are, this was a takeoff on Johnny Cochran, who was the lead attorney in the O.J. Simpson case. Literally the biggest thing going on at the time. So anyway, Phil Morris talks about in the inside look how he knew it was in the write-up about the character. Okay, this is like a Johnny Cochran style character and lawyer. And he's like, oh my God, I grew up with this guy. Ever since I was 7, I would see him in the barbershop. Like I would hear him talking. I knew him from when he was a public defender to like him rising up in his career. So, I mean, he just had it in the bag. So I don't know. Those kind of stories just, I don't know, they give me the chills a little bit. Like that is meant to be. No one could have played Jackie Childs like Phil Morris plays Jackie Childs. I get lost whenever he's on screen because it's so incredibly brilliant. Oh, maybe my next podcast will be Egregious Preposterous, the Jackie Childs podcast. All right, now it's time to move on to Greg's Sack Lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor, and every week he sends his sack lunch full of thoughts. The first thing I find in his sack are his overall thoughts. He says, here's another example of an episode I completely forget about. Of all of the people Elaine dates over the run of the show, the Maestro is one I must choose to forget. He rubs me the wrong way, and it's not the actor, Mark Metcalf, who I know from Twisted Sisters We're Not Gonna Take It video from the 80s. That's really funny. But just everything he says and does is so obnoxious. Why does Elaine like him, let alone go on vacation with him after just meeting? She's one of those bounders. Nice. Is it a perception that someone who is an orchestra conductor and has a place in Tuscany is somehow a fascinating person? He's almost as bad as that desperado guy with the Fargman furniture fetish. Anyway, on with the sack. Okay, so we disagree. Again, we love this episode in my house. And like I said, I think it's a lot of it has to do with how much my husband enjoys both the Maestro and the security guard. And we differ too on the Maestro. I just think, I don't know, there's more to him than most of the men that Elaine goes out with. So I appreciate it. Plus, I like when she gets to play against really brilliant actors. Like, I think that's why I like Putty so much, because Patrick Warburton is such a fantastic actor. So I don't know, when someone's on par with JLD with their comedic acting, I feel like it's kind of a gift. But I see what you're saying. I mean, he is obnoxious. It's so funny you mentioned the Twisted Sister video, because I learned that in the Notes About Nothing. They mention how Mark Metcalf were not only in that video, but apparently a whole series. So my husband back in the day was a total metalhead. So I mentioned that to him. I was like, did you know the Maestro was in a Twisted Sister video? He goes, oh my God, I know exactly who he plays. He plays a teacher. Like he just clicked in his head. And he was like, he even brought it up later. He's like, I can't believe I never saw that before. I'm like, I can. You're not good at recognizing people. You have to disagree, Greg. I think the Maestro is kind of fun with Elaine. All right, next in Greg's sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, for some reason, I really like when Jerry asks Elaine what she did the night before and she says nothing, then follows it with literally nothing. I sat in a chair and I stared. This visual is so silly to me. Like, she hates when Putty does that on the flight in a later episode, yet here she is staring into space. Oh, I love that we both thought about Putty. And I just wondered, like, did the writers remember this, sitting in a chair and staring? Probably not. I think they just were playing off of Patrick Warburton's portrayal, how he just did squint and stare all the time. But that's so funny. Yeah. I mean, sitting and staring, that's my podcast about Putty, sitting and staring. We got Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast, Egregious and Preposterous, the Jackie Childs podcast. Now we have Sitting and Staring, the David Putty podcast. All right. Well, I'm leaving that up to you, Greg. I think you should do that. Greg goes on to say, Elaine has a few good scenes with Bob Cobb, specifically in the restaurant where he is saying he prefers to be called Maestro. But when he goes off on how sensitive he is about it, Elaine should have run for the door. Get a life, Cobb. I also think it's cute that she thinks Leonard Bernstein is probably called Lenny in social situations. Yeah, I love the delivery of that line. I mean, his friends just probably called him Lenny. She's really trying to make a case here, like, hey, man, don't worry about it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I love that scene, so I'm not going to tell her to run for the door because I think it's absolutely hilarious. Like I said, I do think it speaks to Elaine's kind of overarching desperation to find someone. So the fact that she's weighing her options in that scene, she's looking at him, taking it in, going, all right, Maestro, fine. I'm going to do this. Next, Greg says, I don't know how to feel about Elaine singing opera in the car. Part of me finds it adorable, and part of me finds it so cringy. It's so over the top, and after she had sung as she got into the car, I did not need more of that bit. So this is either a favorite moment or least favorite. I haven't decided. I think it's definitely unnecessary, but maybe it's just to show she's all in. I think, you know what? I'll just totally flip on that. I've made a decision. It was necessary because I think we needed to show Elaine all in with the Maestro. And she's losing herself singing in the car at that moment. And yeah, I kind of agree with you too. I'm like, 2 singing bits, but I accept it. Next, I find in Greg's sack his scene swap idea. He says, I have no real scene swap ideas other than I just would like more crossover between Elaine and the other storylines. Jerry acts as a sounding board for the other 3 in this episode, and each of those scenes with George at the diner or Kramer at the apartment could have just included Elaine there to have a witty one-liner. Yeah, I totally agree. There was not a lot of overlap. And like we always say, if they're all together, it just makes it that much better. Finally, in Greg's sack, I find his extra thoughts. He says, one of my favorite exchanges in the entire series is when George says, I can sense the slightest human suffering. And Jerry says back, are you sensing anything right now? I love a perfect retort, and that is a perfect retort. Agreed. I have nothing else to say except totally agreed on that. It's a really funny moment. Thank you so much, Greg, for sending in your thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, now for my favorite Elaine moments. The scene with Bob Cobb. I mean, that whole scene when he tells her he prefers to be called Maestro. Her nonchalantness always gets me. Her blank look for a split second before she says, excuse me. Also, after his little tantrum, okay, so that's a fact. That sort of bewildered look is great. And at the end, that little shrug. It's just, the whole scene is a favorite moment. I love it all. A close second, though, is her self-satisfied moment after lying about saying, I've never seen you looser. And my final notes on this episode, it's definitely a fave, mostly because of the guest actors, I have to admit. The Maestro, the security guard, Jackie Childs, all of those performances really do it for me in this episode. And like I said earlier, I like Elaine dating the Maestro because he's quirky in an unputty kind of way. Their little meet cute, I guess you could call it, in Jerry's apartment is well done. It's very believable. And JLD's performance in that scene, it's more subtle, flirty Elaine. It's just charming Elaine, just general charming Elaine. Also, the fact that Elaine is so enamored with the man who bothers Jerry is so great on a lot of levels. But I don't get a sense that that's why she's doing it. I think she genuinely is attracted to the Maestro. The moments with her singing, I mentioned that, Greg. I like them. JLD got to flex some comedic muscles in those moments, especially. So I think that's probably why I gravitate towards them. She gets to use some physicality. She gets to show off her singing voice. It's really fun. Overall, again, a fave. But I think we could have gotten some more fun moments between Elaine and the Maestro. I think we could have, as I was going through this episode, I think it's a little bit too much cafe latte stuff. And then we just could have had some more moments of maybe her messing up, calling him Bob a few more times. Or maybe overdoing it with calling him the Maestro, like saying Maestro too often. I don't know. Just more Elaine needed, per usual. And we could have I think that we could have just gently shaved some cafe latte, maybe a little George stuff. And that would have made a perfect episode because it would have been more Elaine. And I think that's all I can say about the Maestro. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, it's at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me with any thoughts, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.